Afternoon, adventurers! We're back here today with the M spells. Spells that start with M that have changed in the new Player's Handbook 5e D&D 2024. There are quite a few M spells, so buckle in, and let's get started without any further ado. Mage Hand's description now specifies that we can manipulate the hand, have it do a thing when the spell is cast, instead of having to wait and use a separate action. That's usually how I see it run anyway, but technically in 2014 that wasn't the case, and now it specifically is, so it's better. Magic Jar is a weird spell, but now it's a little bit simpler. Now possessing a creature only gives you that creature's HP, hit dice, strength, constitution, and dexterity scores, as well as their speeds and any special senses. These replace your normal ones, so if a creature has Dark Vision and you don't, you gain that. But if you have True Sight and the creature doesn't, you lose that. You also don't get access to the creature's special features anymore, it looks like, or special attacks. So if you possess an Evoker Wizard, you don't get their special Arcane Blast attack, it looks like. You do, of course, still retain your alignment and personality and any features you have, which also appears to include species features. Even though you're in a different body, it doesn't say those are replaced, so I mean, talk with your DM, I guess, but it seems to be the way it is. Magic Weapon has added Glow Up. It now does not require concentration, and using it to give a +2 bonus instead of a +1 now only requires a 3rd level spell slot. When the spell starts at 2nd level, bumping it up that 1 spell level is not actually a huge cost. Though it's worth mentioning, using it to give a weapon a +3 bonus is still going to require a 6th level slot. Still, being able to enchant your allies' weapons or your own weapon without concentration is way, way better than the spell used to be. Major Image has had a similar change in its upcasting, in that instead of casting at a 6th level to get a duration of until dispelled without requiring concentration, it now only takes a 4th level spell slot. How crazy is that? Mass Cure Wounds is now Abjuration instead of Conjuration, which makes sense. It doesn't exempt undead and constructs, as is the case with pretty much all the healing spells as far as I've seen so far. It seems to be up to those creatures to be unaffected by healing spells because of their own features. The spell now restores a little more HP as well, healing 5d8 plus spellcasting ability modifier instead of 3d8 plus spellcasting ability modifier, so bit of a glow up there as well. Mass Heal is also Abjuration instead of Conjuration now, and also does not exempt constructs and undead, and it now cures poison, so that's cool. It also doesn't make any mention of disease, as is perfectly normal in the 2024 version of the game. We're starting to see a theme here. Mass Healing Word is now Abjuration instead of Evocation, and now heals 2d4 plus spellcasting ability modifier at 3rd level, though it only gains another d4 from upcasting, unlike how Healing Word scales. But it does heal up to 6 creatures, so more healing overall. And the spell also does not make an exemption for constructs and undead anymore, just like the others. Mass Suggestion now properly applies the charmed condition. It doesn't just have a clause that creatures immune to charm are immune to the spell. It now actually charms people, and it clarifies in the text that commands, or suggestions I should say, that would lead the creature or its allies to take damage are now what the spell considers unreasonable enough to negate the spell's effects. Maze now uses an intelligence investigation check to let a creature escape the maze on their turn, instead of a raw intelligence check with no skill proficiency, so a little bit easier to get out of. The spell's description also doesn't mention Minotaurs or Goristros anymore, presumably because those creatures have their own features in their stat blocks that make them able to escape mazes and immune to this spell. So having that in the spell's description was kind of redundant in the first place. Meld into Stone now specifically takes 5 feet of movement to get out of the stone, where it didn't specify a distance before, and damaging or destroying the stone while the caster is inside now deals force damage to the caster instead of bludgeoning, for whatever that's worth. The message cantrip is now blocked by 1 foot of wood, metal, or stone instead of varying distances, and is still blocked by a thin sheet of lead or any magical silence. Meteor Swarm, like the other sphere spells, no longer spreads around corners. This isn't probably going to be a big deal because it is 4 massive AoEs, but there you go. Mind Blank no longer blocks divination spells on the caster, meaning the caster can benefit from things like True Sight and Foresight. So that's good. I don't think the intent was ever to block those positive buff type spells, but it's certainly nice that they work now. Mind Spike, which was originally in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, has had its range doubled from 60 to 120 feet, otherwise it works the same as it always did. Mirror Image has changed in a positive way. Now instead of having their own AC of 10 plus your dexterity modifier, the mirror clones simply take the place when you get hit. So of course it uses your own armor class, which is probably better than 10 plus your dexterity, I hope, for your own sake. Now instead of rolling a d20 when an attack is coming in to determine whether you or a copy is being targeted by the attack, when you get hit, you roll a d6 for each of your copies, and if any of them are over a 3, a clone gets hit instead of you. Mislead no longer requires the caster to swap between their own senses and their illusory copies. You can sort of perceive through both at once. This is the same way that things like clairvoyance and arcane eye work. It's pretty normal for this version of the game. Moonbeam now deals damage when it appears and when it enters a creature's space, as well as the normal times when creatures enter the space or end their turn there. This means it's totally possible to rake it 60 feet across the enemy line and damage just a bunch of creatures at once, which is very cool and very fun. Mordenkainen's spells have all changed a bit. Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound now disappears if the caster is 300 feet away from it instead of 100. The Hound now properly has True Sight, although it could see invisible creatures, see into the ethereal plane, and see through illusions before. Now it simply has True Sight. The Hound's attacks now use a dexterity saving throw instead of an attack roll, and deal force damage instead of piercing. And the Hound can now be moved up to 30 feet as a magic action from the caster. Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion has a material component that is now just a miniature door worth 15 gold pieces instead of several different things worth 5 gold pieces each. It's just a little easier to manage now, so that's nice. Otherwise it works exactly the same as it used to. Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum now lasts until dispelled if cast in the same spot for 365 days instead of permanently. So that's a bit of an unfortunate twist. So it can unfortunately be dispelled even after being cast that many times. And last, Mordenkainen's Sword has been buffed a fair amount actually. Is it a good spell now? Who knows. But its range has been increased to 90 feet, and its damage has been increased from 3d10 to 4d12 plus spellcasting ability modifier. So that's actually huge. With a 20 in the spellcasting ability modifier, that's an increase of about 14.5 damage on average per hit. And the sword can now move up to 30 feet instead of 20 feet. So that's also nice. Funnily enough, a spiritual weapon cast at 7th level, which it's easy to compare these two spells because they do pretty much the same thing, will deal about 1 more point of damage on average than a Mordenkainen's sword, so take that as you will. But wizards don't get spiritual weapon, so at least now Mordenkainen's sword is roughly on par. It doesn't gain a bonus from upcasting though, so spiritual weapon will actually outpace it at 8th or 9th level. And that's all the M spells. We got through it. We did it. We're here. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and thanks to those who are liking and subscribing, of course. And I'll see you in the next one for the N and O spells. Happy adventuring.